Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you to Google for hosting this. I have a little talk for you guys about
Number 9.
a job that we did together with the guys at Google and Disney, and a bit of a story around that, because a lot of the work that I do is quite intense as an experience. I try to make experiences. I tell interactive stories. I think of the browser as a kind of new cinema screen, and that's something that comes through in all of the work that I do. So my slides are a bit in a strange order, but my name is Anrick, and I am a interactive director for a production company called Unit 9, and we make stories within the browser as well as for the smartphone. And something that is a theme throughout the work that I do, it's this battle between emotions and speed. So in my mind, the emotion is really about intensity, but the browser is the place of speed. And that's a more broad theme, but it's an interesting sort of paradox. A lot of the work that I do and a lot of the challenges that I face while doing my projects are about this clash of two sides. And what I kind of mean by that is that a story really is about character or plot or both, and it takes time to build that up. The emotion comes out of experiencing something that you can emote, that you can feel or understand. While the browser, or certainly most browser-driven experiences, are about action discovery, just like games. You need to get to the point quite quickly. And so for me, that paradox is interesting. It's a fun space within which to work. I enjoy it, and also it throws up a lot of problems. And I'm going to talk a little bit about more of the problems that we face on a project in order to make the experience quite an emotional one. It's something that is a personal challenge. It's something that I enjoy working on. This is a real tweet. I'm not sure if you can read it in the back, but I'll read it for you guys. You know this Mozart guy isn't bad. And I thought it was a nice sort of idea. It made me think a little bit. It's something that makes me think about how memorable is something. How long will something stick in your mind? And I don't even mean a few days or a few months, which is often in internet time, the kind of timelines we think about, but much more than that, 10 years. How much of the things that we experience are going to be remembered 10 years from now? And how do we make something that is truly memorable? I have a few ideas about that. I'm experimenting with this, and I'm certainly no expert, because it's very difficult. And it's difficult in the browser to keep people focused. It's very difficult to give people an incentive to go further, to click more, to explore, as opposed to jump around, look a little bit, and then move on. So how do we make something which is memorable and is going to be remembered? Something that is memorable for me often is maybe because it's very different, maybe because it's technologically very challenging, or because it's like something you haven't seen. There are parallels in the work that I do, and certainly even more so the work that I admire, to, let's say, cult film. Something that stands out because it's challenging something, or because it stands outside of your expectations. And I try to look at that, and I try and take inspiration from that and bring that back into the process that we follow and into the final product. Ultimately, I think something is memorable because you can touch it and feel it, because it speaks to you, and stories do that. But often the story alone isn't really the full picture. The project that I have to talk to you guys about is a project called Find Your Way to Oz, and it's a collaboration that I did together with the wonderful team at Disney, as well as at Google Chrome. Find Your Way to Oz is essentially an interactive trailer for the recent Sam Raimi film, Oz the Great and Powerful. And making that project was quite a journey, because I think we were trying to find a way to create an experience out of the film, but at the same time not cover the same ground as the film. We were trying to capture the intensity of the film and the journey that Oscar, the lead character in the story, goes through, and capture that with the browser. And so you very quickly come up against the same conflict, emotions versus speed, cinema versus a browser, with the way that we are used to experiencing a story cinematically versus how we are only just about able to experience it in the browser. And I'm going to deconstruct this project a little bit. I like to go through and break down the small steps that we take. It's something that is fun, and I hope you enjoy. To look at it in terms of the cogs and the small pieces that make up the full experience. In essence, we had this wonderful film that was in the middle of production when I began talking to Google and Disney. And we had some communication with the team behind Sam Raimi's production company. We talked extensively with Google and Disney about how do we translate the journey to Oz into an interactive experience. And it's quite tricky because you can't really cover the same ground, like I say. But also you have to add interactivity to this really rich, beautiful visual world. And there were a number of challenges that threw up. Most importantly, really, was trying to make it interesting to explore Oz while not going too far into Oz, not drawing yourself into the world of Oz, but making people interested in it and curious about it. So a trailer in the true sense. Find Your Way to Oz is a WebGL experience. It's about 5 minutes in terms of the experience online that the average user would follow. And you're using your webcam or your mouse in order to interact with elements from the story of Oz. And that's done in 2 steps. I'll explain. There were 2 sides to the film. I watched the film about halfway through production, a very early rough cut. And the circus scene of the film is something that really stood out for me as something very interesting, as an environment to explore and look at. So the question is, how can we bring people into the world of Oz? How can we bring that to life for them, but allow them to choose and allow them to play and have fun and experience something? How do we give them control? And the circus seemed to me like a space where we could do that. So what we did is, I'll play you a video in a sec, but we built a WebGL-driven 3D circus environment where you walk around from step to step, place to place, and you can experience and interact, put yourself into the context of the world of Oz that Sam Raimi was creating. And then the second segment of the film that stood out for me as very rich ground for us to explore interactively was the balloon sequence or the storm sequence. Now, in any sort of classic Oz context, in the Wizard of Oz as an idea, the storm features very heavily. It's a very crucial part. It's the way that you make it to Oz. And for me, the storm became kind of the journey, really. It was the trigger for the term, for the phrase, find your way to Oz. What made me realize this could really all be about making your way to Oz. And how do you get yourself into the world of Oz? That being the film. So those are the 2 sections that we picked out. I've got a short video for you, which I hope you can see. So the key premise of the experience is make it your way through the circus, get wrapped up in the storm, and find your way to Oz, see if you can make it out and complete the journey. The circus is something that we spent quite a bit of time building. I'm not going to talk about it a lot. I'm going to talk more about the storm. But there was an interesting challenge about this circus, and it's something that goes back to this decision about WebGL and how do you make that really come alive in terms of textures, in terms of colors, in terms of shapes. If you're making an interactive trailer for a film, a live-action film, that online experience can't look too animated. It can't look too sort of specific. It can't look too stylized. And it was a real challenge for us, a fun challenge, exciting challenge, but nonetheless very difficult, to get this look that is somewhere between cinematic and animated, to find a space in between that doesn't feel like it sort of breaks the narrative of the film and the style of the film. So that was something we spent quite a bit of time on. This is a very early prototype of how that circus started to come to life. It's about a week or two into the production process. It's trying to sculpt something that looks just right, that doesn't feel out of context of the film. But much more interesting was the storm. The storm is a WebGL experience. You have the freedom of movement to travel through that storm. You need to really survive and make it all the way up into the funnel. And bringing that to life was quite an interesting story. I'm going to take you through step by step. We began with really early sort of storyboards, and it's obviously a lot of fun to make beautiful boards, and it sort of made us all feel very excited about what we were going to put together. But the truth of making that a reality and giving it the freedom for the user was actually a little bit more tricky. If you can see, this is a very early prototype where we were using simple sort of spheres, simple shapes, stacked up together, rotating around in an infinite sort of loop. And we figured, well, we can apply textures to that and really make that come to life. What that would look like in the browser, here's an early render of that, is like this, and this is a couple of weeks in to our production process. So I felt pretty excited and fairly confident. Wow, this is going to be awesome. We're going to really put this together. We've got a long way to go. This is going to be fine. But we had a kind of a veto from our technical lead on this approach, because really just the basic challenge of bringing a storm of that scale to life in the browser on pretty much everybody's computer and making sure that runs smoothly, that the experience is real, wouldn't have been possible. My challenge here would have been make it more soft, make the clouds more real. I wanted people to be able to touch those clouds, to feel like it's just like how it looks when you look out of the window in an airplane. And we really, my technical lead especially, didn't feel like we would be able to reach that, so we were kind of stuck. Funny enough, the same tech lead, Yates is part of our team, was working separately on his master's degree in neuroscience. And this is a test of a mouse cortex. This is a shader-based visualizer for mouse cortex research. And when he was working on that project as a side piece, he thought, well, we could turn this into the storm. It was a pure matter of coincidence. It's an interesting process of finding inspiration from the most unlikely of sources and then bringing that back into the project that we were running with Google and Disney and saying, okay, we could bring this alive. This is the pathways through which the neurons travel in the cortex of a mouse. And with some coding work and some simplification of what we had in some senses and adding moving animated textures in other senses, we very quickly ended up with a much more dynamic and much more interesting sort of soft textured cloud. Essentially, the left side is the mouse brain, on the right side is the result version. That's the shader-based storm that we built. It feels soft, it feels cloud-like, and I was beginning to get really excited about it. Equally, the animation isn't just a loop. It's code-based. It's pure code, so it's never the same. It's always changing. Those clouds, if you look at them, don't really repeat the same shape ever. So pretty exciting for me to see that come to life. The next challenge really was bringing that storm together in terms of the layers of what comes around it. So the storm funnel itself, which is the main structure in the middle, that's just one small step of it. We were looking at how do we layer objects around that. The storm would have swept up things from the circus, so we wanted to see that. We wanted you to see the objects flying around that you had seen below on the ground. Equally, we had a challenge to create a sense of speed and pace. As you approach that funnel, The feeling that you are moving at speed is hard because a sense of scale initially gives you the impression you're moving very slowly. That funnel isn't coming towards you and changing in terms of size very quickly. So we start to bring that to life. Then, in addition to those layers, we added fake lens flares, which you can see just in front of the balloon there, as well as little details like animated water drops that cover the lens and a sense of wind on the balloon surface. So we were trying to create something that felt tangible, that felt real and alive, and yet that you had the power and the freedom to look at from any different angle that you would want to. So finally, the storm came to life as a final piece. These are some close-up stills. It's incredible to see the connection between elements. So for example, the funnel here is shown on the left, and the background is just a pure hand-painted matte painting of a sky, of a sunset that we had commissioned. And then the 3D objects that fly around. Those objects never technically appear, careful. Those objects technically never appear in the same place. It's kind of strange as an idea. They aren't there together, and yet they blend together beautifully, and it's very exciting to see how the colors from the matte painting sort of bleed into and through the cloud texture. For me, that's quite exciting anyway. I like those kind of details. Equally, the objects and the lens flares that fly around that, you can see them quite clearly here. Made it a very powerful experience, quite scary in some senses and very beautiful in other senses. I'm quite proud of the layering and how natural that feels together, because those are all very different assets that come from different teams and were produced at different times. So putting them together and seeing them work together well is exciting for me. And then finally, the storm inside, the funnel leading up all the way into the final reveal, the whiteout of the sun. It's very interesting to see that those patterns of clouds change and move if you have the ability to stand still and look at it. It came together very nicely. I'll show you, again, a very brief clip of the intro, and I'll skip it because the contrast doesn't quite work. Careful, guys. But again, so you had the freedom to move around and look and affect the path of that balloon. And then slowly, as you start to approach that balloon, as you start to, the funnel, as you approach the storm, you start to get swept up in that. It's an inevitable journey. You really can't escape. But true to the film, it is what takes you all the way to Oz, if you will. I'll skip it there. So as you exit the storm and you make your way through it, you've made it to Oz. And from our point of view, Oz was really the beginning of the film. The whole point of that trailer was the idea for you to make it to Oz yourself in a metaphorical sense, to make it to the theater and start your experience in the land of Oz as made by Sam Raimi. My point in all of this is the balance and the contrast between emotions and speed. It's quite a big challenge, and we don't always get it right. And I think sometimes it's fun because the mistakes you make also contribute. It's a journey that you take with the team and also with your clients. The mistakes you make along the way sometimes allow you to push forward and push further. If that very early demo that we did of the storm would have been just about okay, then we might have never really been able to get to the next step in terms of creating something that feels experiential, that feels emotional, and at the same time is fast enough for you to remain engaged and to be excited. So the balance of emotions versus speed for me is one that on every job is quite different. And we try to make that balance. I want to create something that people will want to experience, but that they'll get swept up in, and that'll take them on a journey that they might not be expecting. Ultimately, for me, is something that I aspire to do is make stories that are experienced, not just browsed. I'll finish there. If there's any questions, very welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Have we any questions here for Anrick? Well, I have one. Just actually on that very notion about stories should be experienced, not just browsed. I guess that would be almost every creator's end goal, their ultimate goal in working on a piece of content, be it for an ad or for a brand or something more personal for them. Do you have any or many examples of other creators that would have maybe successfully captured, that successfully have done this?
in terms of creating something that feels experienced.
Yeah, and that captures the audience's attention beyond the initial browsing moment.
I mean, I think I have a lot of personal favorites. I think there's more and more the awareness that the browser is a space where you can be surprised and you can experience something, whether it's a linear story, maybe even on YouTube, or whether it's a sort of click-based adventure or any number of other elements. I think there's more and more the feeling that people are expecting to find that. And for me, that's very exciting, because until very recently, nobody was looking for it.
Yeah.
A lot of people are making wonderful content like that. I'm a big fan of the kind of creators that are working in the online space and have been for a long time. But the power is there to really engage people as much as, let's say, in the cinema. But equally, you have the benefit of doing that at home on your browser. So for me, that's very exciting. I think specific examples, well, there are so many. I think it's quite personal. But what's exciting is that more for me is that an audience out there would look for that. That they wouldn't be just looking online for any of the usual things that you might do, whether it's shopping or social networks or work, email, but that you might also use a browser and see within the browser the potential to be entertained like cinema.